What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another Antler&FeatherCo podcast, Season 2. We're already going on Season 2, guys, and this is still the podcast for the new and adult onset hunters. Whether you are a bow hunter, crossbow hunter, trad bow hunter, spear hunter, gun hunter, AFCO supports you, and we got your back. My name's Vince, and on this show, I, an inexperienced hunter, bring on people who know a whole heck of a lot more about hunting than I do. And as I ask them questions and I start learning new things, I just want to pass it right along to you guys. I'm really excited to be kicking off this next season. We got a lot of really cool things coming with AFCO. Probably later in December, I'm going to share some more details about what we do got going on, but I've been working my butt off behind the scenes, trying to put together something really cool that I think you guys are going to enjoy. So before we get going, I want to tell you guys about a couple friends of the show. We're going to start off with Buzzard Roost Saddles. I tell you guys every week how great they are, and I still feel that way. They're the most adjustable saddles on the market. They're super comfortable. You are going to love them. If you want to get into saddle hunting, or you're already into saddle hunting and you're looking for something a little bit better, check them out. If you use code AAFP10, that's going to get you 10% off your very own Buzzard Roost saddle. They got a lot of kick-ass gear too. Their hats, I'm wearing one right now. They're just awesome. So check those guys out. Moving on, Our Grounds Coffee Co. Our Grounds Coffee Co. is the official coffee of the Antler&FeatherCo podcast. It keeps me going. I really like their Roast Veldt. I think it's more of a medium blend. Then they've got Muley Mayhem, which is their dark, if you're into dark roast coffee. If you want to check them out, use code all caps AFCO on their website. That's going to get you 15% off your order with Our Grounds Coffee Co. And finally, my old go-to Spartan Forge. They were hard to beat before, but they just keep getting better and better and better. They just introduced some new terrain shading feature and things like that. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how Bill's doing it over there, but he is kicking ass on that. I want you guys to try it out. I know you probably have your own apps. Try this one out. You can try it for free, and you're going to love it. And then once you love it and you want the full subscription, go ahead and go to their website. Use code all caps AFCO. That's going to get you 20% off your subscription with Spartan Forge. So let's talk about being a sportsman. On today's show, we're going to discuss a couple things that I think are vital to our lives as hunters. And really what I want to do is paint a good picture for new hunters of what a sportsman looks like, what they should look like. And then for hunters who have been hunting for a while, what can we model for new hunters so they can learn how to become a sportsman themselves. When we talk about sportsmanship, that's everything from ethics, conservation, following laws and regulations, mentoring new hunters, and just enjoying the hunt in general, not just the kill. I've been following our guest this week for some time now, and I truly think he encompasses everything that we should look for in a sportsman. He's been hunting for over 40 years. He's been bow hunting for over 30 years. And he's hunted everything from whitetail to mule deer to antelope and elk all across the West and the Midwest. But the coolest thing about him is he has a really big passion for getting new people into the sport. He has mentored, I think, over a dozen new hunters and helped them fill their first tags and kind of light that spark to get them going. And I wanted to get him on because, like I said, he is the total package of a sportsman. So with that, please help me welcome to the show, John B. from John B. Outdoors. John, how are we doing today?
Great, Vince. Glad to be on board with you and looking forward to our conversation tonight.
Yeah, so am I. I've been wanting to have you on here for quite some time. I've followed along with you for a long time, and it's fun to watch because you have so much knowledge and you're such a great hunter, and you've hunted so many different animals. Like, you're not just a deer hunter. You have so much to offer. So I'm really, really excited and really thankful that you'd come on here with me for about an hour. So you've pretty much been slaying deer this season. I've been watching on your Instagram. Give us a little recap of your hunting season so far. It seems like you've been getting a little bit wet lately.
Oh, man. It's a drought year in Nebraska and Kansas, and I end up in the water like every time. It's just ridiculous. So, it's been a great year. It started out with a bang September 1st. We got after early season here in Nebraska. Our friends from Missouri came up from Just One Outdoors, and those guys had a blast. We had 7 sits over a long weekend. We saw deer 5 of 7 sits. We had shots 4 of 7, and we harvested 3 deer, and came really close on a really nice buck that Austin had a crack at, but it was in the brush. He didn't take a shot, and then he actually missed on a velvet 6-pointer, just a bad break. He didn't check his clearances before the shot, and he hit the railing of the stand at a buck standing there at 7 yards. And I can kind of chuckle because been there, done that. If you've been hunting as long as I have, you've had some epic fails, and most of the time we can just laugh about it and say, hey, if we do the right stuff, hopefully we'll get another crack at it. So we went from September, harvested several deer. I shot 2 myself, and of course that was early season. If you're not seeing big bucks, that's a great time to shoot some does. And we definitely engage in some antlerless management here in Nebraska. I gave those guys from Missouri a hard time because they were using some newfangled $600 saddle setups. I shot 2 does from a $12 camp stool sitting in the corn. So I had to rub it in on those guys a little bit. And then of course later
wins on that.
Oh, absolutely. And then later one of those guys shot one in the woods sitting on a camp stool. So they were going to go old school like me. And it's pretty fun. I still have never used a tree saddle. I don't think I have any intention of doing so, but I guess never say never. So it was a good September. My buddy Dean came down from Minnesota, and his wife was going to revoke his travel permit because he'd been down here 2 other times and didn't shoot a deer. And here I'm posting deer all over the place on Instagram. And she's like, are you sure he's serious? Does he know what he's doing? Well, finally, his first night here, he shot a doe and bought some meat home. And then he later joined us for rifle season and got a couple more deer. So his wife is now going to let him come back to Nebraska now that he's bringing home some meat. But
well, that's good. Yeah, that's the important part. As long as you're bringing home some meat and not wasting the gas money. That's one of my favorite things with hunting is everyone's like, why do you hunt? Well, I hunt because I want clean meat and it saves money on meat. And I'm like, does it save money from buying meat at the store? Absolutely. Does it save money overall? No. You spend way more on hunting gear and all the trips and the gas and the everything else.
It's all true.
That's one of my favorite things.
I tried to use that on my wife, 35 years ago. Just think of all the money we're saving. And she's like, really? Let's just count up, that deer is about $87 a pound by the time we're done with it. I'm like, okay, let's just call it an expensive hobby that gets me out in the outdoors. And it's a real good mental health break for me. I really enjoy it. I use that as my decompression time. But I also use it as kind of fellowship time with friends and brothers in Christ that I've been hunting with for 30, 40 years. And that's an aspect of it that, we chat about, but it's really kind of what keeps getting me outdoors, just being involved and engaged in the creation. And I'm always amazed at the things that I see and experience out there. Yeah.
And you can tell me not to talk about it, but your background as far as what you've done your entire life from an employment standpoint, my brother is a police officer, and I know a lot of the stuff that he sees and experiences every day. And that's one thing that I wish I could get him into. I think it would do not just police officers. I think it would do everybody a great deal of good, but specifically when you're in high stress, underappreciated, underpaid positions, like just to go watch the woods wake up one morning. Things like that, like you said, just to go get a mental health break. There are few places in the world that I think are better for that than to be in the woods before the light or before the sun comes up. I just, that's one thing like I said, we'll talk about later. You're really big into helping new people get into the sport. I'm trying to get new people into the sport through this. And that's the one thing, tagging an animal, it's great. Just the whole hunting lifestyle, I think is great. But I think the best part you had mentioned is being in creation. being out there, seeing what God has created, seeing it all come to life from complete darkness. It's an awesome benefit to being a hunter that I hope that everyone gets to experience at some point in time. Before we get into some of the questions I got for you, I want to cut out and do a quick prayer. And then
Absolutely.
we're going to get into kind of your background as a hunter, how you got into it, where you've gone with it. And then we're going to talk a little bit about sportsmanship. So,
Sounds great.
All right. Lord Jesus, I thank you so much for the sacrifice that you made in my place. You saw a world that was headed to hell, and you decided that while you were God, you were going to put on flesh. You were going to come down here, and you were going to pay the ultimate price that not a single one of us could have ever paid. You stood in our place. You took our nails. You took our cross. You took our sin. You took everything, all the punishment, all the wrath, everything that we deserve. You took that on yourself in our place. In the most amazing act of love that the world has ever and will ever see. Because of that, I just want, if you can reach anybody through this podcast, I just want to glorify you through this. I want you to use this as your tool to get out to as many people as you can. You can save as many people as you can, Lord. And I'm just so thankful for you. I'm thankful for John that he would come on here and spend time with me to talk about hunting and all the things that we get to enjoy in creation because of you, because of what you did. And I just ask that you'd be over this conversation. You would lead us, guide us through, have a very fun educational conversation for new hunters and experienced hunters and just everybody who's listening. But again, I want this to glorify you first and foremost. So Jesus, I thank you. I love you. And we ask all of this in your great name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Vince.
So give us a little bit of background, kind of how did you get into hunting 40 years ago? What did you love about it? And why are you still doing it today?
Wow, that's a great question. So I grew up in Minnesota, and in Minnesota, you are born to fish, and
Yeah.
a certain percentage of the population is born to hunt. And of course, fishing, hunting, outdoors, lifestyle goes together. My father wasn't a hunter. He took us boys fishing. 7 kids, grew up in a small town on the edge of the Twin Cities metro area, and so we learned how to fish. But as I got 12, 13, 14, I saw some of my classmates in school going pheasant hunting and duck hunting and things like that. And I would always read the Outdoor Life magazines, Fur, Fish, and Game. I don't even know if they make that anymore, but it was always, that was a magazine that I got in the mail, like 70 cents a copy. And I don't know how I could afford it, but I just got interested in hunting. So I had a chance to go with some guys who were going partridge hunting up in northern Minnesota, and I kind of invited myself along. I had gotten my hunter safety certificate I believe I was 14 years old, and I went with these guys, and on my very first attempt shot a grouse that was flying through the woods at about 35 yards with a borrowed 20 gauge single shot hammer shotgun, H&R, right? And I shot that grouse, and I was hooked. And so from then on, it was just about making connections, finding places to go. I went with my uncle a few times, duck hunting, just kind of hooked up with these guys that I went on the grouse trip with, learned how to deer hunt. Didn't shoot my first deer till I was in high school. I was probably 17 or 18. And then went off to college, and I went to the academic powerhouse of the North. I'm sure you know it, Bemidji State University.
I heard of it a couple times.
Okay, right? Yeah, located 90 miles from the Canadian border. Talk about God's country. And of course, there's no accidents, right? As Providence would have it, God saw to it to put me with a Christian roommate. I was a brand new believer at the time. I didn't become a believer till I was about 17 years old. And this roommate would he loved to hunt and fish just like I did, but he had a lot more experience. So I have to tell you this story. Every morning, if we're going to go up duck hunting, we'd take a canoe and we'd paddle down the Mississippi River, which is very small up there. It's like a little stream, and we'd jump shoot ducks. If we were going to get up at 5 o'clock to go duck hunting, he would get up at 4:45 and do his daily devotions every day. He had that kind of discipline, and he rubbed off on me as to what it was like to walk the talk of being a believer. And it required a lot of discipline and, self-reflection. And he taught me that. And he was my best friend for many years. Unfortunately, I lost him to a mysterious illness when he was in his 30s. But we hunted and fished together until he passed. And so those were things that he taught me, not only about life as a believer, but life as a hunter and a fisherman, an outdoors person. And so then I just really got the fire, living in Bemidji, going to school. Literally our senior year, when we were not on the meal plan, we lived on what we could catch or kill. It was awesome. We caught walleyes like crazy. I shot a bear. We both shot deer. We shot tons of ducks and geese. And literally we had to rent a locker at the meat locker to store all of our game meat. And that's what we lived on. It was crazy. And now we look back at that and go, what? That's nuts. Who does that? But we did it. And we thought we were normal, but in that part of northern Minnesota, I guess that was pretty normal. But I tell those stories, especially when I lived in California for several years, and I told people some of those stories from my college days, and they look at me like, "Where are you from? I've never heard of anything like this." So it was kind of fun. But then when I finished college and I started my career in law enforcement, we touched on that a little bit. I've been in law enforcement 36 years. I've got 2 more years to mandatory retirement, and then I'm going to hunt and fish like crazy. But I'm sure getting enough in now. Thankfully, I've always lived in places where it's been a target-rich environment. And, of course, Nebraska is definitely in that mix. So anyway, I took up bow hunting after college, and I lived in a Twin Cities suburb, Maple Grove, which at that time was on the edge of the Twin Cities, a mixture of homes and dairy farms and a lot of farmland. And holy cow, it was full of deer. And had bow, met some connections, and went from, striking out my very first year to finally shooting one my second year. And then after that, just shooting several deer a year as the permits started to expand. When I was a kid, if you saw a deer when you were deer hunting, that was amazing. You might have a party of 5 or 6 people, and if one person shot a deer, let alone saw one, that was incredible. Well, fast forward a lot of mild winters in the late 80s, early 90s, and all of a sudden the deer population in Minnesota just blew up, especially in the Twin Cities. So you could get 5 deer a year at that point. And I was used to, like, hey, we're going to split one deer 5 ways. Well, now we were whacking them like crazy. And that's when I really began to become a student of bow hunting and learning the ropes, learning deer behavior, how to outsmart them, realizing, I've hunted bear, I've hunted coyote, I've hunted elk, I've hunted antelope. But if you match wits with the wariest animal in North America, that's the white-tailed deer, and you beat them at their own game, there is something very satisfying about that.
And that, that's like you said, what a coincidence that your college roommate it's funny. It's just amazing. If you look, you can see him everywhere in every story. And and it sounds like your college years are pretty good. I actually want my diet to reflect your college years. Most kids are like eating ramen and they can't wait to be able to afford real food. And I'm like, I would love your college diet. That sounded pretty good to me.
Oh, that was a hoot. Yeah, it was crazy.
So I wanted to use this episode to kind of, this is kicking off season 2, and I want to use it as an opportunity to kind of paint a picture of what a sportsman looks like, whether that's what, as a new hunter, what they should strive for, or as an experienced hunter, the things that we should model for new hunters. And like I said, I think you are one of the best people I could possibly talk to about this. So I'm just curious, like when you hear the title sportsman, What does that mean to you?
To me, it's really simple. It means that we try to do it right. Um, there are, if you look at the game laws in Nebraska, right? It's 97 pages of rules and regs, right? You
Mm-hmm.
cross the border to Kansas, and it's 100 pages of completely different rules and regs. You go to Iowa, Minnesota, Wyoming, it's very different in every state. You really got to do your homework to make sure
Mm-hmm.
that you don't screw up and violate some game law. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, having the mindset and the desire to do it ethically and correctly as a way to honor the game that we're harvesting. And if you start from like that high level and say, I just want to do it right, then the details normally take care of themselves. Now, you still have to be diligent. You got to know the rules so you don't break the rules unintentionally. And certainly you don't want to break the rules intentionally, because then you have to deal with somebody like
Mm-hmm.
me. And sometimes that makes for a bad day, right?
Right.
So, but we want to honor the spirit of sportsmanship by just trying to do the right thing at all times. And I find it really interesting when I'm mentoring a new hunter, which I've had the privilege of doing it many times, and this year no exception. But I'll have some of my new hunter friends ask me questions. There's a guy that I've been mentoring for a couple of years that, and of course he's shot a bigger whitetail than me, which how fair is that?
Ooh.
Um, but that's okay.
Hey, that means
He's
you're doing it right.
it must be all on the mentor. But he will ask me questions that kind of throws me off. Like, okay, now why do we have to stop hunting a half an hour after sunset? I'm like, well, because that's the rule. Okay, I get that, but why is that a rule? And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
because it wouldn't be fair to hunt deer at night. Well, you hunt coyotes at midnight. Okay, well, yeah, I do. That's different. The rules allow for that. They're varmints. They're dirty varmints, by the way, and they must be annihilated,
Mm-hmm.
or at least kept in
Yes.
balance. Okay, let's be fair. Um, so, so then I find myself taking the time to explain to him, okay, so we want to engage ourselves in fair chase, right?
Mm-hmm.
And fair chase actually looks different from state to state. In Nebraska, if I put out a salt lick, I'm in violation of the law. In
Mm-hmm.
Kansas, I can put out a 5,000-pound bag of corn if I want, right? And
Yeah.
it's fair chase in some
Yeah.
states. So that's where the nuances come in. But really it gets down to like, what is the heart attitude? Like, I'm going out into the woods. I'm enjoying creation. I'm going to harvest this animal. I'm going to use it.
Mm-hmm.
Another question that I get from some of my new hunters, well, what would be wrong with just like taking the cape and getting it mounted? And, I don't really like venison, so what? Just leave it for the coyotes. Well, that's called wanton waste. That's unethical. That's wrong. I mean, we want to honor the creation. We want to honor that animal by using it. Now, if you don't like venison, I'll bet you can find somebody who does.
Right.
It's your obligation to harvest it, process it, and if you don't like to eat it yourself, give it to somebody who will enjoy it. And if
Right.
you don't know anybody, let me know, because I can find a few people that will eat that deer, right?
Absolutely.
So it's good, organic, clean meat, um, and it's what we owe to the animal for taking its life. And now you can get into all kinds of different philosophies and things. But as a believer, we're taught to be good stewards, right? A good
Mm-hmm.
steward doesn't mean you don't kill a deer. A good steward means if you kill a deer, you eat it. You use it the way it was intended.
Right.
So I'm very fond of in First Peter when the biblical command, kill and eat, right?
Yeah.
So it's in the Bible. Look it
Yeah.
up, okay?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's one
um,
thing I've gotten from a couple people of, you know, eh, unfortunately in our society today, anytime anyone can kind of take a cheap shot at your beliefs, they want to take it. And that's one of the things I get from people. Well, if you're such a Christian, how are you okay with going around killing things? And it's like, well, I mean, I'm going to give you a biblical answer, so I don't know that you're going to really agree with it because that's not your worldview.
right.
But, God did create animals for us to eat. And yeah, God calls us to be good stewards with the land. And part of that is, yeah, with the animals were created to be eaten, not just I mean, don't get me wrong. I love to sit in a stand and watch everything in the woods do its thing without it knowing I'm there. But again, they were intended for a food source. And yeah, I think that's interesting that you brought that up. Yeah, when we, from a newer hunter's perspective, when we hear things like ethics, I think that gets thrown around a lot. Whether don't take an ethical shot or be an ethical hunter or whatever it might be, what exactly does being an ethical hunter mean?
Well, it means, following the spirit of the law. And again, you have to know it in order to do that. I'll give you a real world example. And normally I have this philosophy in life that if you do the right things, normally stuff falls into place.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like we live in God has created an orderly world, right? The way he designed it. Now, of course, this whole thing about sin came in and kind of wrecked all that. Now we have all this
Mm-hmm.
crazy stuff going on. But, the whole idea is, if you try to do the right things, normally stuff works out. I'll give you an example. 3 years ago, I shot a buck when I was bow hunting in Kansas, and it turned out to not be a great shot. And the buck left the property I was on, crossed a road, just a dirt farm road, and went on to somebody else's property. I was hunting on private land, and the other side of the road was not land that I had permission to be on. Well, I knew that that buck was probably going to take several hours to die. I was pretty convinced that it was, but it wasn't a perfect shot. Sometimes it happens. So I spent the
Mm-hmm.
next several hours trying to figure out how I could get permission to go on that private land to retrieve this buck. So I went and knocked on a neighbor's door. It was a farmer. He was out there taking care of his cattle. And I'm like, "Excuse me, sir, do you own that land over there on the backside of this section?" He goes, "No, I don't, but I know the guy who does." And so he gave me the guy's phone number, and I called, left a message. I explained, "Hey, my name's John. I'm hunting on so and so's land. I shot a buck. It ran onto your land. I want to get permission before I go on your land to retrieve it." Now, in some states you can do that, but in other states you can't. So again, you got to know the rules. And Kansas is pretty clear. If it's not your land and you're on it, you don't belong there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I mean, it's very clear. So 4 or 5 hours later, the guy calls me back. He happened to be on a pheasant trip up in South Dakota, and he goes, "Who is this?" I said, "Oh, my name's John. I'm hunting on so and so's land. It's right across from," and he owns several pieces of land. He's a farmer,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, I don't want to go on trespassing on your land, unless I have permission. And he was kind of taken aback. He's like, "Well, of course you can go get it. I mean, you shot that buck, right?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, but I want to do the right thing." He goes, "Huh. Well, I really appreciate that." Now, he probably didn't have a lot of hunters in that area. It's a very sparsely populated area. There aren't a lot of hunters there, which is why it's jackpot, by the way. Um, and so he said, "Well, by all means, you have permission." He said, "I only ask one thing: don't drive in the crops." And I'm like, "Oh, absolutely, sir. I wouldn't do that. I'm going to grab a friend. We're going to go in there. We're going to drag that deer out." And he says, "Well, would you do me a favor?" He says, "I'd like to see a picture of it." I'm like, "Absolutely." So we go in. Sure enough, we waited till it was dark. Went in. Sure enough, buck was dead. Drug it out. Gutted it out on my side of the road, not his side of the road. So I didn't have a
Mm-hmm.
gut pile where if he or his sons or his friends were pheasant hunting, they're not going to step in some gut pile, right? I made sure it was on the property that I had permission to be on, right? Now he gave me permission, but you know what? My point is, I didn't want him to come across the gut pile and go, "Oh, that's right, that joker over there shot this deer and it died on my
Yeah.
land. He left a mess," right? So I tried to do it right. Anyway, I got a picture of this buck and I sent it to him. And he, we engaged in a lengthy phone conversation. And he's like, "Oh man, that's really great. I'm really glad you called me, and I'm really glad you got the buck. It's a real nice buck." And I just thanked him again for the permission. Fast forward 3 years, which is 2 weeks ago. I'm in Kansas, and I'm helping my friends during their rifle hunt. I had shot a deer with my bow, so in Kansas as a non-resident, you get to pick, black powder, archery, or a rifle. So, and I always
Mm-hmm.
archery hunt. So then I go down there to help my friends who own the land when they rifle hunt. Anyway, we're driving by this piece of land, and I see some does out in a field. I stop and I start glassing, and there are 4 bucks bedded in this CRP grass, and 2 of them are absolute shooters, like 150
Mm-hmm.
plus bucks.
Mm.
And I'm like, and so I'm like, oh wow, that's incredible. I wonder whose land that is. I look up on my Onyx, and it's that guy who I spoke to 3 years ago, and
Really?
I called him up and I said, hey, do you remember me? It's John. I shot that buck at one of your land. He goes, oh, absolutely, I remember you. And I said, sir, I'm driving back to the farm. My 2 friends have buck tags, and I noticed that there are 2 really nice bucks laying in your CRP grass uh, over at such and such road, and I would like permission to take them in there and try to hunt those bucks. And you know what his answer was? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You have permission to go in there, and best of luck to you, and great. If I hadn't had that encounter 3 years before, and I was just some guy cold calling, hey, my name is Bill, can I go shoot your deer? My
Right.
chances are going to be pretty low, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, the sad part of it was, by the time I got back to the farm, got the boys, went back there, some pheasant hunters had just stomped the CRP on the other side of the
Oh,
fence line, and they caught their scent and they all bailed out of there. It
yeah.
happens. But
Yeah.
so next year, I know that when I drive by that CRP, I know to stop and glass. And
Yeah.
if I see him, whether it's archery or rifle, and I call that gentleman back, now he's already given me permission twice to go on his land. I don't know him. I didn't pay him any money. I just was ethical and respectful and did the right thing. Chances are he's going to give me permission to go in there again.
Yeah.
And if not, I'm totally cool with it because that's his prerogative as a landowner. But
Yeah.
those are some of the examples where if you do the right thing, normally things work out.
Right. And yeah, I mean, not that that's the reason to be ethical, but yeah, that's just a great testament to the respect factor of, when you're talking about being a sportsman. um when you're treating land people, just when you treat people with respect, it affords opportunities that you might not otherwise have. And like you said, you shouldn't look at it as a reason to, okay, I'm going to be respectful and call this guy because maybe he'll give me permission. You just do the right thing because that's what we're called to do. But I mean, look at the opportunities it leads to. Speaking with ethics and stuff, just to kind of touch on a couple other things for newer guys. What are your feelings on? Do you think it's in the realm of ethics to, I was thinking of like, make sure you're practicing with your weapon enough, so that you're not doubting your abilities, or where are your thoughts on, one of the big things is you hear, don't take unethical shots at animals. What kind of things, how do you just, or what do you consider an unethical shot for a newer guy? Is that something where it's just a matter of you don't have confidence? I mean, obviously if they're behind brush taking a shot through a bunch of sticks, there's a low likelihood that shot's going to land and be lethal. But what other things should newer hunters be aware of in terms of being ethical in the woods when they're pursuing a game animal?
Actually, it really gets down to competence. I mean, being able to shoot ethically has everything to do with competence. Competence only comes through preparation. You've got to practice. You've got to practice in real world conditions, in wind and rain and low light and bugs biting you, and there's a stick in your eye. I mean, like literally, you need to
Mm-hmm.
practice all of those scenarios. And when I've had the privilege of taking new people out in the woods, it's one thing to be at the range, whether it's archery range or in your backyard shooting bow and arrow, or whether you're practicing at the rifle range. It's a sterile environment, and when it's go time, the adrenaline gets flowing. You can get tunnel vision. I had a gentleman that I took hunting a couple of years ago. He was around my age, and um, we had a deer at, it had been like 65 yards. So we're talking chip shot. This is rifle season,
Mm-hmm. Mm.
and it took 5 shots to bring that deer down. 4 of them were
Yeah.
misses. Okay, and it's like, okay, he wasn't ready, and I failed as a mentor. I did not prepare him for the adrenaline dump. Okay. Now, again, I've been hunting for 40 years. I've been a cop for almost that long. I understand this concept of adrenaline management, right?
Yeah.
You don't get too crazy, don't get too low, just kind of even keel. Now, don't get me wrong, I get excited when I see old Racco coming through the woods. Okay, I get a little crazy, but I've learned to control it, right?
Yeah.
In fact, if you watch my video, it's on Instagram where I shot the buck in Kansas this year. If you watch it all the way to the end, I got guys texting me. They're just busting a gut because I shoot this deer. I got it on video. I've been trying to get a kill on video for years. I'm terrible.
Yeah.
I'm the worst videographer on the planet. I'm really bad at it. Finally, I mounted a GoPro to my stabilizer, and I followed the deer, shot it, and I'm watching it and I'm videoing it, and it goes and piles up 50 yards away. It was a great shot, if I do say so myself. That doesn't always happen. And at the end of the video, I go, oh, I probably should say something, and I just go, well, that worked out. And that was it. I mean, so but some of my buddies got a kick out of it because, you see guys in the tree just losing their mind after they make a shot, jumping up
Yeah.
and down. And that's cool. I mean, that's joy, that's excitement. That's just not me. I get a little
Yeah.
stoked. I did break down and cry when I recovered my elk. Bow hunting elk 8 years in a row. I finally shot a bull
Yeah.
4 years ago, and it was a tough track job. It was a good shot, but it just didn't bleed on the outside. I mean, they're tough animals. Finally, I find it. I'm jumping up and down, and I never cry. And I'm like, my buddy looks at me, he's like, "Are you crying?" And I'm like, "I guess I am." I mean, I was so excited. But 8 years, and I've been crawling up and
Yeah.
down these stupid mountains and trying to outsmart a bull elk, which apparently they're much smarter than me. But I
Yeah.
finally did it anyway. So, um, adrenaline management. When I shot that bull at 11 yards,
Oh my
I
gosh.
remember getting down on my knees. It came out of this canyon. It was running and it stopped and it started walking. Came to full draw when its head got behind a little tiny popple tree. It stepped out, looked at me, and I remember, focus, breathe, control. I shoot, and I remember I was so focused. I saw that arrow double lung him, and I was lower than the elk. I saw it double lung him, and I saw my luminoc go through the elk and go out into the canyon and disappear. And I'm like, well, I'll never find that again. you know, not to mention the fact that this big elk turned and wheeled down to the bottom of the canyon, tipped over
Yeah.
dead. But it's just, those are things that you you don't really know what it feels like until you experience it, right? So I'm trying to tell a new hunter, you know, get yourself together. Don't lose your mind, I mean, like,
Yeah.
focus. Pick a spot on the deer and shoot the spot. Don't just see deer, shoot deer, because that's a formula for disaster.
Yeah.
And then you can lose your mind after you make a good shot. But that's part of the ethics of it. I want you to put that crosshairs. I want you to put that pin, you know, right on the heart, right on the double lung, right. You got to be able to hit a softball like that at 45 yards with your bow, right?
Yeah.
And you got to make that thing count. Rifle hunting, man, you should be able to hit that thing in the heart at 2.25 offhand, right? And if
Yeah.
not, you need more practice.
Yeah.
Now, thankfully, most shots are much, much closer than that, so we don't need to worry about it. But that's part of it's the responsibility to be prepared. It's like I preach all the time, folks in my business. You need to show up on time in the right uniform with the right mindset, ready to go. That means you got to check your equipment the night before your shift, right? Well, the same thing when you're going hunting. You got to check your equipment. What do you mean you got a dead deer laying there and you don't have a knife? What, are you
Right.
kidding me right now? I mean, preparation, preparation, preparation. That means you got to do your homework, right? And it's a lot of work. I mean, it looks like fun to go out there and shoot a deer or shoot a duck or a goose or something, but it requires a lot before you pull the trigger. And so as we
Mm-hmm.
train new hunters, we're trying to instill, I mean, there's so much that goes into it, but instilling in them, do the right thing, do the ethical thing. You're going to go goose hunting? Awesome. It's a lot of fun. You goose hunting in late season in Nebraska, you're going to freeze to death, right?
Yeah.
But you got to practice shooting in cold conditions, right? If you're going to go archery hunting in September, It's going to be 91 degrees and the no-see-ums are going to drive you crazy. Where's your
Yeah.
face? Where's your face mask? Where's your net? Right? Oh, you didn't think about that. You got to plan ahead. Preparation, preparation, preparation. And that's all part of being able to ethically deliver that shot at the moment of truth, and then do everything else that is correct before, during, and after. Recover it fast,
Yeah.
get it gutted out fast. It's 85 degrees. That thing needs to go from hoof to freezer, in less than 2 hours. Or you're gonna get some
Yeah.
bacteria. You're gonna get some spoiled meat, and now you've wasted it. And you don't want to waste it. You want to be a good steward of it. See, now you're
Yeah.
getting me fired up. I can talk about this stuff all day.
Well, that's what we're here for. But I really do like that you hit so hard on preparation and how that ties into ethics. Because I think a lot of times you hear ethics and it can be a surface level buzzword. Obviously, if it's a 70-yard shot and you've never shot past 40 with your bow, it's unethical to take that shot. But usually it doesn't go much further than that, and especially for a new hunter who's trying to, there's a lot you don't know yet. Like you said, that once you finally do put an animal down, there's a lot of things you haven't experienced yet, and that's where you're saying preparation is so important, whether it's preparation of your gear, it's preparation of, you haven't done it hands-on, but you've watched video after video after video of how to blood track, of how to break that deer down, how to field dress it, how to get it out of the woods, things like that. I'm really glad you brought that up, because preparation, that's not something I've ever heard in conjunction with ethics before. So, you mentioned that you've mentored quite a few new hunters. How did that start? Where did you kind of light the fire for that passion that you have now?
Well, really, it started. Well, first of all, I mean, I have so much enjoyment in the outdoors and hunting and fishing. I just feel obligated to share it with others, and being an outdoorsman it's kind of a team sport. I mean, I'll go hunting by myself, and I often do. My wife gets a little nervous when I do that, but I always let her know where I'm going and stuff. Well, what if you
Yep.
fall and break your ankle? I mean, I would laugh at that 20 years ago. Now I'm, a couple
Right.
of years from being 60. She's probably not way off.
Yeah.
So it's safer to hunt together with somebody else. But it really started, just again wanting to share the experience. I was on a softball team back in my church in the first town that we lived in after we got married, and it was two guys. We played softball. We went to church together. Good guys. They were part of my non-cop friends, which I encourage
Hmm.
cops to have friends outside of the business, because if you
Yeah.
just think cop, cop, cop 24/7, you begin thinking like in a way that's not normal, right? Because we're a
Right.
little bit off bubble because of some of our experiences, right? Your
Yeah.
brother knows about that.
Yep.
So it's good to have people outside of the business speaking truth to you, going, "Hey, you're kind of thinking crazy right now." Oh, thanks,
Right.
brother. I needed that, right? So anyway, these are guys I hunt with. Not that having cop friends are bad. It's not, but you have to have a balance, right? So these guys,
Yeah.
one buddy's an IT guy, the other guy works in a factory, just regular guys, and they kind of keep me grounded. Well, I've been hunting with those guys. One of them had never deer hunted before. I took him hunting for the first time in 1993, and it was a special like management hunt in the city limits. First time deer hunting, he shot six. Okay, needless to say,
Six deer?
yeah, it was a management hunt. It was awesome.
Crap.
There was 11 of us in this special management hunt, shotgun slugs. The whole idea was to reduce the population. So we devised a plan on how to do that. It was all during hunting season. It wasn't like go to the golf course at night, turn on the sniper rifles, and we didn't do that because it was too much
Right.
pushback from some of the other towns. So we said we're going to do it during hunting season, hunting hours. Everybody's going to buy a tag. We could buy 5 tags each. We could party hunt. 11 of us shot 33 deer in a day and a half. I was so tired of gutting and dragging. It was
My
ridiculous.
God.
But anyway,
I
this
bet.
1993. That was my buddy Todd's first deer hunting experience. Okay. Needless to say, he was hooked, right? So I was
Yeah, I
really,
bet.
I was kind of hooked on, I mean, seeing his joy. And then I got my other buddy in that group bought him bow hunting for the first time. He had rifle hunted but never bow hunted, and found a guy who had a used bow for sale, happened to fit him, and I took him out, and he's been bow hunting with me ever since. So those guys, and then I start running to people at church. So one young guy, this gets back to the preparation story. Young guy at church in Minnesota. He's like, "Oh, I've been hunting a couple times, but I never see anything. I never get anything." And like, well, it was second weekend. All my friends, my son, I think, was old enough to hunt at that time and probably already had shot his deer. I said, well, I'm going to go out again. Why don't you come with me? And I could maybe give you a few pointers. And I remember it had snowed and we only found one set of tracks and it was all over the woods. And I said, that's a buck. And I said, you need to follow where that set of tracks went into that swamp. You set up here downwind of that spot and you wait till dark and you'll see that buck. And he said, are you sure? Really? I've never heard anything like that. Trust me. So he sits there. Right at quitting time, the buck comes out and he's shooting a 30-30 with a scope. And I hear pop, great, he got it. We meet back at the truck. He goes, yeah, I shot and I missed. And I'm like, okay, tell me where you were. Were you sitting in that spot that I told you to sit by that tree? Yep. And you were watching that little land bridge in the swamp where the tracks went in? Yep. And it came out that land bridge? Yep. I said, that's 37 yards, son. You shooting a 30-30 with a scope? You sure you missed? Well, I saw it kind of hop and run back into the swamp and I never saw any blood. I said, okay, we'll go back and recreate the crime scene. All right. So we go back and I notice preparation. He only has a little headlamp, right? Well, the light on my phone is brighter than that, right? So of course I have the world's brightest cop super flashlight, right? And I said, okay, now watch this. I said, now you sit down. You tell me where you're sitting right there. Where was the deer? Okay, right there. Came out. Where did you shoot? Right there. What did the deer do after you shot? Well, I'm trying to remember. And of course, this is a teaching moment, right? Really important. Watch what the animal does after you shoot. He said, well, it kind of kicked. I said, like a mule kick? Yeah, that's it. I said, okay, you 10 ring that deer. He was, well, there's no blood. I said, sometimes there isn't any blood. Sometimes the exit gets plugged up with a chunk of meat or something and it just doesn't bleed. It bleeds on the inside. And he's like, well, I didn't know that. This 18-year-old kid, I don't expect him to know all this stuff. I said, so I take out my super bright cop flashlight and I watch and I shine. I said, okay, here's the deer's footprints, right? And I said, about 7 yards behind where the deer footprints are, we should find a couple specks of blood or hair. And I shine the light and sure enough, there's blood. He said, oh, I did hit it. I said, yeah. I said, in fact, I'll bet you it's laying over there in that swamp about 50 yards. 35 yards, it was piled up. I mean, he made a great shot on it. And he just left going, I can't believe what just happened. And I said, part of it, you got to trust your ability, scope rifle, 35 yards, even in low light. You put that thing right behind the shoulder and, and you squeezed it, you didn't yank it. Yeah, I felt really good about it. You got to trust yourself. And then having the right equipment. If he had had a bright flashlight, he'd have been able to see the blood right away. And but anyway, it was a good recovery. It was a nice little buck. And, we learned behavior. A deer alone at the end of rut, walking around like he owns the place, that's going to be a buck. Okay. He goes into that swamp. He's probably coming out of there because I happen to know that was a dead end swamp, right? I said, if you're just patient and you're waiting in the right spot, and then if you have the right equipment, it's going to help you. So the next time he went hunting, which was with his brothers and cousins and stuff, he was more prepared than the time that he showed up to go hunting with me. And I felt like I'd passed on a few nuggets of wisdom that I learned. And I only learned those things by doing it wrong along the way, right? Showing up, no bright flashlight, not paying attention to what the deer does, not paying attention to the wind, all things that I know today are essential, but 30 years ago, I mean, what does the wind have to do with it, right? I mean, until somebody takes the time to help you understand it, it's school of hard knocks, right?
Oh yeah. That's kind of the description of my life. Luckily though, for me and for other guys who are starting now, if we can't find a mentor, if we don't know someone like you, I didn't grow up in a hunting family at all. We didn't have guns growing up. We didn't have anything. I've learned pretty much all on YouTube and watching guys like yourself. And yeah, it's like you said, in terms of preparation, in terms of like knowing what to do, it's very, very, very valuable to have guys like you who are willing to, you know what, maybe one day you don't go get to hunt, but you get to go help somebody else. And you get
Yeah.
to spark that passion in somebody else. And then I'm going to guess that guy probably went on, when he went with his cousins or brothers or whoever, now he knows a little thing or two. Now he gets to pass it on. And that
Exactly.
just
Yeah.
keeps going.
Yeah. Yep. That's absolutely right. And that's part of, part of my passion. I know my friend, Ephraim, who's a brand new hunter, took him out a couple times. 3 years ago, he shot his first buck. Last year, he shot a really, really nice buck. And this year, we were in the right spot at the right time, ready to go. And a buck stepped out. And just as he was getting ready to squeeze, the wind switched, and that thing caught our scent and wheeled and turned and took off running. And thankfully, I had told him, we don't want to shoot at a running deer, especially if it's running away from us. Now, there are some circumstances where if it's running broadside across us, maybe it's already been hit. Okay, there are circumstances where I will shoot at a running deer. But in that case, it was a no shoot. And he didn't shoot. That deer got away. I'm like, okay, congratulations. You've been hunting 3 times and you've killed 2 bucks. Third time you struck out. Sucks to be you.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
so anyway, that was a good learning experience for him as well. One other, I want to show you a picture real quick. You may have seen this one on my page, but this year I got a chance to take my friend Jonathan. He's one of the pastors at our churches, and he's from Arkansas originally. So plenty of deer in Arkansas, but they're not very big. So I had to introduce him to a Nebraska bruiser.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, and so that was a 150-inch plus deer. And he, being a pastor, he's a busy guy. He's got a family. He also just took on the role as a volunteer chaplain for the Nebraska State Patrol where I work.
Nice.
And so he's a busy guy. And he said, I would really love to go hunting, but I really only have one day to hunt. And it was
Yeah.
the Thursday after opener. So I'm like, I got you hooked up. I got permission from a friend of mine who owns a small piece of property that nobody had hunted this year yet. Took him down there, set up a blind, and it was right on the edge of a bunch of cattails. And sure enough, we saw this buck chasing these does. Actually, we saw 3 bucks chasing one doe into the
Mm.
cattail swamp. And it was on the other side of the fence when we first saw it. That was a no shoot because that was on the neighbor's property. I said, if that doe drags that buck into this cattail swamp, we're going to go get him. That's exactly what happened. That hot doe went to bed down in that cattail swamp. Now, we were in a blind, a good spot, wind was favorable. We could have waited him out all day, but I'm like, look, I've been to this rodeo before. That buck is thinking about one thing right now. He's not leaving that hot doe. Unless we spook the doe, he's not leaving that swamp. I said, with this wind and the other bucks serving as a distraction, we can walk right in and kill him. And he looks at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, I grabbed the bog pod, he grabbed the rifle. I'm like, follow me, let's go. So we get down below the level of the cattails and we're sneaking in. We finally get up on a little rise. I set the bog pod up as high as it'll go. So get your rifle up there. And I could hear that buck grunting and trying to run off these other bucks, right? He's doing the tending grunts, just a yip, 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 and these other bucks kept going in there and he'd run them off and he'd go back to that doe. And I knew we were close. Finally, I let out just a long grunt, and he comes charging right at us. And he pops his head up above those cattails at 37 yards. And the only thing he could see is the rack, his eyes, and a little patch of his neck because he's trying to find us in between the cattails. He's looking for a buck. All he sees is these 2 doofuses lined up behind this bog pod, and he's trying to figure out what we are. And I'm like, and Jonathan's literally shaking. He's like, I just put my hand on his back, and I'm like, can you see his eyes? He's like, yes. I said, aim low. And he brought the scope right down from his eyes. Boom. 10 ringed him right there in the neck. Took out 2 vertebrae, piled him up right there. 37-yard shot. We would have never tried that maneuver if I hadn't done that before, right? Through that experience. And he's not like he's a brand new hunter, but he's hunted before, but had never had an experience like that. And I was like, if you know, you know, right? Now I wouldn't have tried that maneuver like 9 out of 10 times, but the wind was right, the distractions were right, the rut was right, everything was right. Let's go get it done. Now we could have just easily spooked him out of there, right? But um, I thought our chances were pretty high of success. And I know in Iowa, you guys got some cattail swamps and some creek
Yeah.
bottoms, and
Yeah.
tell you what, I've seen some crazy things go down in cattail swamps because those deer love that thermal cover. They'll bed on top of those cattails, or they'll crawl in a hole in the cattails. And I've seen pheasant hunters walk right by them, and then wait. The buck will wait until you're 10 yards past them, bloop, pop up and go. I've seen that on deer drives. I've seen that, pheasant hunters, dogs. I mean, they will. It's kind of a whole different, amazing sub ecosystem. You got a cattail swamp on your property. You got something, especially during the rut, because they love to go there.
Yeah.
See, I got off another
That's
tangent there.
hey, that's great to know because that's that's not something I would have usually looked at. I and again, it's a lack of experience. And so the final thing I want to kind of cover in terms of what I kind of think of when we talk about being a good sportsman, obviously would be conservation. There's a lot of ways nowadays that you can get involved, whether it's just kind of the automatic way of buying your tags, buying your equipment, your ammunition, things like that. And then there's other ways where, you can be parts of like, your NWTF boards and you can get involved in your area, contact your local DNR. What are things you can do to help with the land? And what are some things that you've seen over the years that have improved through conservation efforts? And why should a new hunter care about conservation, especially early on in their hunting career?
Well, I mean, hey, look, this is a renewable and sustainable resource, okay? Um, but it can be easily squandered. I tell this story. We hunt at a farm in Kansas, down in Rush County, which is kind of west central Kansas. Again, big farms, not a lot of people. And the grandma uh, who owns the farm still, and her brother, and he's 90, she's in her late 80s. They tell this story that when they were children growing up on that farm, the local newspaper would always have like a here's what's going on this week. So and so got married, and such bizarre is happening at the church, And they remember reading that Billy Smith saw a deer, and it was in the paper. It was
Yeah.
that memorable. This would have been in the 40s or 50s, right? It was so memorable that somebody saw a deer in west central Kansas that it was in the newspaper, right? Now, okay, so let's say we're 70 years down the road, and the conservation has completely changed that dynamic. Of course, you're coming off the depression. Every deer got shot out in the farm country because people needed the food. Okay, God bless them. That's the way it was. Okay, there probably weren't a lot of regulations in place back then, and if there were, they went out the window when you were hungry, right? But since that time, the state of Kansas, the state of Nebraska, the state of Minnesota, the state of Iowa have implemented lots of different rules and regs to enhance the population, and literally it's gone to the moon, right? The population is so much better today. And now we can have debates, and I do have healthy debates with my friends on all sides of the borders. Kansas is better deer hunting in terms of trophy bucks than it is in Nebraska. And there's reasons for that. I mean, and you can be critical of Nebraska Game and Parks, and complimentary of Kansas Parks and Wildlife, but they just have different philosophies and they manage it differently. I think one thing that we have, and again, you could argue both ways, In Nebraska, we rifle hunt during the rut. So everybody complains that every 3-year-old buck gets shot. Well, in some places that's true. Um, but I tell you this, anybody who wants to come to Nebraska and buy a tag and goes out, they're going to shoot a deer if they have any idea what they're doing, because there's plenty of opportunities. In Kansas, it's really expensive. Cost me $500 as a non-resident. I'm not guaranteed to get a tag, and I only can shoot one buck, and I have to choose my weapon ahead of time. So it's a lot more tightly managed, but as a result, I seems like I only see giant bucks in Kansas, which is really a great problem to have. I don't see giant bucks in Nebraska as much. They do exist here. I mean, I've seen some. My friends have all shot them. I haven't shot them. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong, but um, they do exist. But it's a different philosophy. It's either numbers or quality, but you can argue that and split hairs all day. But think about 1940s, that somebody saw a deer in Kansas was memorable.
Yeah.
Okay, we've come a long,
Yeah.
long ways. And so the conservation in terms of what the state has done to manage that resource, number one, great job. These state wildlife agencies are doing a great job with a lot of critics. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody's on
No, yeah.
social media telling them how goofed up they are. Competing interests, competing interests. The farmers in Nebraska want more deer tags filled. The hunters in Nebraska want more quality bucks, right?
Right.
If I'm a farmer and I'm getting a fifth of my crop wiped out by deer, I'm going to be a little irritated. That's my livelihood, right? So I understand, competing interests. But as a hunter, what I can do for conservation is I can invest in the many different nonprofits out there. I'm a big fans of Whitetails Unlimited. I happen to belong to that organization. There's many other good ones, lots of good ones out there. I don't want to pick one over the other, but they're all good. They reinvest in habitat and they reinvest in education because look, when I am term limited out my hunting abilities, hopefully when I'm in my 80s and I decide, I'll let the young guys do it,
Mm-hmm.
um, somebody has to replace me. Somebody has to buy those
Right.
licenses that go to the habitat and go to sustaining the programs. There are fewer and fewer people getting into hunting today than there were when I started 40 years ago. Thankfully, we have way more women getting into hunting today. We need to continue to encourage that. It is not, there's no reason it has to be a male dominated sport. I mean, it always has been, but that trend is changing. Fishing too. We need to get more young women involved because I don't know. It seems like more dopey young men are too busy, doing video games. I don't know what they're doing, but they're
Right.
not getting into hunting and
Growing
fishing, so let's
growing their
go
man
here.
buns.
Yeah, let's go, guys. I mean, come on. We can't all be baristas. I mean,
Yeah.
let's do something here. I'm gonna get some hate mail for that, but
Oh, I'm all about it lately.
right. I mean, come on. So we need to get we it's our responsibility as hunters to replicate ourselves and look at it from an abundance mentality, not a scarcity mentality. Well, if I teach all these other guys how to hunt, they'll all hunt and they're going to all go in my favorite public spots and they're going to shoot all the, deer,
Right.
ducks, whatever.
Yeah.
You can't look at it that way. You have to be selfless, have more of a leadership mentality and say, look, a rising tide floats all boats. We need to get more people into it. And especially don't neglect the young ladies. They are as hungry for these kind of outdoor adventures as any of the young guys are. So don't dismiss somebody because they're a female or a young gal. Get them all out there. It's not for everybody, but we should expose this great outdoor lifestyle to as many people as we can, because when we're too old to hunt, this will not be sustained if we haven't replaced ourselves and gotten other people involved and engaged. So that's one of my passions. That's why I continue to bring new people out, young, old, anyone in between. It doesn't matter. Guys from work, guys at church, people that I know in the community. Hey, I'd like to try that one day. Hey, you just met the right guy. I'll take you out and I'll show you. Maybe you won't like it. Maybe you'll like, hey man, I'm bored and I'm freezing to death, right? Maybe you'll never do it again,
Yeah.
but at least you'll get a
Yeah.
chance.
Right. Right. And yeah, I think the most important thing to nail down is, what you said about people getting worked up about, well, if too many people are hunting, there's not going to be enough to go around. Well, the flip side of that is if you're the only hunter left and the rest of society hates it, you aren't hunting either.
That's
So
right.
and it goes back to, again, not to hit on this again, but as a Christian too, like God created this world, and there's so many amazing things you experience out in the woods that if you're not out there, you will never know exist. And if even if you take somebody out and they don't get anything, they're not going to walk away from that experience, just, well, that sucked. There's so much to gain just from being out there. And I think that's awesome that you've made that such a priority in your life and in your hunting career, like just getting more people out there and involved so they can enjoy what God's created. And it seems like for anybody listening, if you somehow get hooked up with John, they always tend to, every picture I see, you take somebody out and they kill a giant. So your odds are pretty good.
Yeah, well, let's be clear. Those are the only ones that make it on social media, right?
Yeah, that's
But
fair.
I have been very fortunate. I've got some great places to hunt that are both private and public.
Yeah.
I had some really gracious landowners where I would go. They're like, "Yeah, you're welcome to hunt here. Knock yourself out. We don't hunt. These deer eating all of our crops. Give us a
Mm-hmm.
hand." One phone call, say, "Hey, I have this new guy, this new dad and son or dad and daughter from church. I want to bring them out." And they've always green lighted me. Um, and, as fate would have it, more often than not, I get those guys in the money spot and they end up whacking something real decent. But to me, if we're bow hunting, any buck with a bow is a trophy. I
Absolutely.
try to only shoot mature bucks, but if I'm taking some young guy or young gal out hunting, I mean, you shoot what is a trophy in your eyes. I'm not going to look down on you. Um,
Right.
and of course I have to give my friends a hard time. I'll even let you shoot it with a crossbow, right? I know you've poked
Hey,
that bear a few
hey,
times, right?
careful.
I know, right?
Careful.
Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
know, but it's okay. It's
Yeah,
legal. Knock yourself out.
that's the biggest thing, and in the intro I allude to it. I apparently gave off the impression that I am anti-crossbow and anybody who uses one is an idiot and blah blah blah. I want to be on the record again saying I think crossbows are great. I think they definitely have a place. I think that if it's legal where you're at, by all means, if that's your jam, use it. I was
Yeah.
I was
It,
trying to discuss that when an animal comes in front of you and you have to draw a bow, hold it full draw. You can, I've gotten a lot of trad guys mad at me because compound bows aren't real bows either. There's an element of that release. If you can't control yourself and your release is off, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. Where I've shot my brother-in-law's crossbow, it acts like a gun. I mean, it's very much, you got a scope, you pull a gun trigger, it's shouldered or on a bipod. I was just trying to say, you know what? It's a little bit different. And man, I've got a lot of people that agree with me, and I got a lot of people that I haven't been called this many nice names in a long time.
it's awesome.
But
Here's the beauty of it. We can stir up controversy over anything and everything if we really wanted to.
mm-hmm,
Um, but we got to be in the business of not being so easily offended. And, frankly, I need to do a better job of not so easily offending people, right?
yeah,
It's a gift. What can I say?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but that does bring up one thing, and it talks about, it does tie into the whole sportsmanship aspect. We have so many anti-hunters and non-hunters out there that we hunters got to stop fighting with each other and stop criticizing each other. And just like, come on, let's be
yeah,
the adults in the room. And you're into trad, awesome. You're into crossbows, awesome. I'm a Matthews guy, you're a Hoyt guy, let's fight.
right,
No, it's all good stuff. Let's just all have a good time, and let's just enjoy God's creation, enjoy the harvest, enjoy the experience. That's what we're out here for. And it's not a zero sum game. Your success doesn't come at my expense. I want you to be successful, Vince, in your outdoor adventures, even if you're hunting right next door to me. If you shoot the old whopper face and I don't get to shoot that one, hey, that's more on you, right? It's not a net loss to me. So we need to think of it as an abundance mentality and really treat this as a brotherhood and a sisterhood, and let's just stop all the fighting with each other. Now we can poke each other a little bit with some of these little jabs because we're having fun, right? But let's not all get offensive or offended because that's not good for hunting either.
Right. And yeah, that's a good point that I want to hit on, and I want people to understand is I'm very much pro hunter. And as I said, I'm very much whatever weapon that you can legally use that you want to use, I'm all for that. I'm also I've gotten a lot of criticism that you were very divisive. You're divisive. I want to say that I think that you kind of mentioned it, within the hunting world, we should be able to civilly debate things amongst each other without the fear of, because I've gotten a lot, well, the anti-hunters. Make sure you get involved in conservation. Make sure you're voting correctly in your areas. Make sure you're getting involved in politics in your local area. That's the real heavy part to worry about with anti-hunters. I should be able to debate with you back and forth about whatever weapons we want to use civilly. And because my worry is what a lot of people have alluded to is self-censorship. I should not say that I don't think a crossbow is on the same level as a compound bow. And that's another problem in a whole thing. That's a whole nother topic. But I also think we should be free to debate amongst ourselves. And then at the end of the day, when anti-hunter comes in, whether you shoot a crossbow, a gun, a compound, a trad bow, that's when we're all hunters. And right. I will stand next to you and defend your right to use a crossbow or whatever the hell you want to use that you're competent with and is legal. I'll defend it until the day I die at your side. And that's where I think, like I said, healthy debate amongst ourselves, I think, is a good thing. And then, yes, at the end of the day, remembering that, yeah, whatever we disagree on, you don't like Matthew's bows or you don't like my camo, we can give each other crap about that all the time, but that doesn't matter when it really matters.
Versus saddle.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Hey, don't hate on the saddles, man. But,
yeah, right.
But
I paid good money for that camp stool. It was $12.
Oh, man. And it's more successful than anything else that's being sold on the market. But yeah, I think that's a good way to end it out. Not to go too far down that rabbit hole. John, I don't want to go this whole show without giving you an opportunity to talk about your Instagram channel. I know I've kept you way longer than I told you.
Yeah, that's right.
Where can people find you on Instagram? Because I think that whether they're new or experienced, there's a lot to be learned from your Instagram and following along with you. So where can they find you and follow along with you?
You bet. So I'm at John B Outdoors, and that's my Instagram channel. I also have a YouTube channel, same name, John B Outdoors. There's a whopping total of like 3 videos on there. So it'll take you about half a minute to watch them. Yeah, there's some classic ones on there. Like I said, I'm the world's worst videographer. I'm trying to do better, and I'm going to put a few more things up there. But all my stuff is on Instagram, so it's at John B Outdoors, and I pretty much am stomping through Nebraska and Kansas in my spare time. Fish, hunt, turkeys, whitetails. Got a chance to shoot antelope this year with my rifle. Got a chance to shoot antelope 2 years ago with my bow. That's a hoot. You want a hard hunt? Go try to shoot a speedy goat with a bow. It can be done. I mean, I've proved it can be done, but you got to fight the rattlesnakes and the 90-degree weather. And yeah, that was a whole different experience. But the reason for the channel is just to share the experiences and try to highlight just how much fun it is to be in the outdoors. And I try to get some crazy videos, especially fishing. My wife has videoed me catching a 20-inch bass while she was floating in her floaty frog thing, pulling behind the boat. Just happened to get a video from the water level of me landing this giant bass.
Nice.
Awesome. It's something we enjoy doing together. She doesn't like to fish as much, but she likes to get out in the boat when it's nice in the summertime. but it's not really, the purpose isn't self-aggrandizement or anything like that. It's just, hey, let's share this beautiful, cool, fun outdoor adventure that we get to live in our spare time. So that's the purpose of it.
Awesome. Well, hey, man, I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing all your knowledge with us. I think this has just been, just for me, this has been a great episode for me to learn and just great conversation. And I appreciate your time so much. And guys, make sure you're following us on Instagram. That's at Antler&FeatherCo. We're on YouTube. That's also at Antler&FeatherCo. And we're on Facebook too. That kind of gets whatever I put on Instagram kind of flows over that way. If you guys found value in this show, if you feel like you guys learned something new, if you've got something that you can now take out into the woods with you, please subscribe, follow, like, share, rate, and review, all those things you do on social media. When you guys do those things, it allows this show to get in front of more people, which ultimately helps me bring great guests on like we had tonight. And that's going to make you more deadly in the woods at the end. So I appreciate every single one of you guys. I really do. I hope you guys have a great week ahead. We're going to catch up with you next week. This is the opening episode of season number 2 for the Antler&FeatherCo podcast, and we are going to talk to you guys later. You are listening to the Antler&FeatherCo podcast.